Hello, I think we're live.
Perfect.
A little late start today,
That's all right.
but good to see you guys.
Yes, wonderful to see everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day to everyone
Happy
out there.
Friday.
That's right. Happy Friday.
For most of us, I think we're still all on Friday. It's possible, like New Zealand. I don't know. I'm not up
Yeah.
on my time zones, but I think we're close to it.
Yeah.
Sorry, New Zealand, Australia, if it's already Saturday for you.
And Hawaii's
On the other side.
yesterday. Yeah, Hawaii's
yeah.
on yesterday time.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting.
That's true. So it actually could
Yeah.
be Thursday there
It could,
still.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
If
Well,
you're from either of those places, you can let us know.
that's true. So this is an interesting one for
Yeah.
today.
What's our topic today?
Today's our topic is about group interviews. And how to stand out in a crowd, what does it mean to succeed in a group interview?
Yeah.
And Greg has a lot of experience with this because when he was in business school at Wharton in UPenn, they did a lot of training for like different positions, consulting jobs and tech jobs and all types of corporate jobs, even startup type jobs. Anything you can imagine. So
It's
there was
funny.
a lot.
It's funny that you mentioned consulting
that,
and
right?
startups.
Yeah.
But traditionally, one of the biggest pathways for an MBA was actually banking, investment banking.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't even come up anymore because
Yeah.
it's a sector that's losing some of its sheen. It's just funny how the times change.
Yeah, times change.
But yeah, I
continue
mean,
to change.
continue to. So definitely, I have a lot of experience with it.
Yeah.
It's a very common interview format when you are interviewing for a client-facing role.
Right.
Because oftentimes with clients, right, you're in a group with a bunch of other people. And so they need to know, how are you going to be facilitating the conversation and sort of directing the group toward a certain type of consensus, right?
Yeah.
How do you interact with others?
Yeah.
And you can't really get that in a one-on-one interview.
Yeah.
Because a one-on-one interview is just you and the interviewer, and you can't really tell how the candidate operates when there are more people in the room.
Right.
So that's what's powerful about group interviews, right? Instead of it just a one-on-one, it's a conversation with everyone, and there has to be some form of turn taking.
Yes.
Right. There's a lot more sort of social dynamics at play.
How do you deal with like interruptions? Basically, how do you communicate? What are all the communication practices that you put into play, like active listening, interrupting properly or not, knowing when to refrain, when to jump in, the turn-taking rules, all of this that is really integral to good communication. So what are people looking for? What is the hiring manager, the recruiter looking for when they're calling together a group interview?
So
What's the purpose, right?
The purpose is the number one purpose is to determine how well are you able to interact in teams and in client settings where you have, stakeholders, people that depend on you, people that you need to convince, right? How do you interact in those settings? So this isn't so much, are you able to draw up spreadsheets and crunch numbers or design beautiful, copy and logos and
brochures,
such.
whatever.
It's not so much the hard skills here. It's much more of the soft skills.
Yeah.
How well are you able to influence other people? How well are you able to build rapport with them? Right? And again, generate consensus.
Right. Coming up with a solution or a compromise. How well are you able to take other people's viewpoints and perspectives into account?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
How do you deal with things like groupthink? Will you go against the crowd? Will you, stand with the crowd?
Yeah, it's funny. The kinds of skills that are applicable to group interviews pretty much encapsulate the entirety of our exploring
It's so
business,
true.
right? I mean, exploring is all about developing social skills. And we're not just talking about, social skills when you're out with friends. We're talking about professional social
That's
skills
right, because
too.
they're just as important, if not more important. Because if you think about a regular sort of 9 to 5, right, traditional jobs where we go in, we clock out, we're in the corporate world or a startup world or wherever you work for a substantial amount of time. That amounts to several hours in a week, right? And you're doing more of that than you are, interacting with in a more casual setting. If you really
Yes.
crunch the numbers and look at it from that perspective, professional social skills, right? It's not something we hear often talked about, but they're just as important.
They're critical.
Right.
I mean, you need these are the kinds of skills that get a deal
Yeah,
made.
yeah,
Right. These are the
exactly.
kinds of skills that cause
Yeah.
a team to come together and deliver on the output
right.
that they're required to
Yeah.
deliver on. These are the skills that we learn throughout our lives, but often not explicitly.
Yes.
Right? It's much
That's
tends
right.
to be sort of you watch what other people do and you try and mimic them and you see what's effective. And the whole purpose of Explearning is to sort of really focus and explicitly teach and discuss those skills.
That's right. Things that we were never really taught.
Right. And that's so applicable to group interviews because all of that comes into play when you're in a business setting, right?
That's right.
Most business isn't one person, right?
Exactly.
Even sole proprietors, right, who
Yeah.
own their own business, and
Yeah.
it's just the one person running the business, they still have clients, right? They have to deliver and have conversations.
And interact with as many people or as few people as,
Yeah.
on any given occasion.
Exactly. And so the point of group interviews, this is a very sort of circuitous way of answering it, is to test all these soft skills that you have
Right.
that don't come out in the one-on-one interview.
Yeah.
Now, you don't see the group interview in all interview flows, right?
Right.
It tends to be reserved for, again, more outward-facing or team-centric
That's right.
roles.
Yeah.
And it tends to be at larger companies
Yeah.
that have a high inflow of applicants,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because to facilitate group interviews, you need a few people in your pipeline to do them properly.
Right.
It also just it's a little more sophisticated of an evaluation process. And so smaller companies, less experienced companies that don't hire as often,
Right.
don't necessarily have the HR firepower to effectively operate a group interview.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But they are considered a more advanced style of interview. And when you get to one, it's very important to know what it is
That
you
you're
need
getting
to do.
into and what you
Yeah.
need to do. Okay, so let's now talk about that. So we've covered the purpose of group interviews. And now let's head into like that second part, right?
Yeah. What do you need to do?
What do you need to do?
Yeah. The number one thing
In the interview, let's talk first about that.
Yeah,
right?
during the interview.
Yeah.
The number one thing in a group interview is to demonstrate that you're a team player, right? And this is very different from the one-on-one, where your
Right.
goal is to establish fit in the culture of the company.
That's right. Build rapport with
Build- right.
with the person you're interfacing with.
And establish your hard skills, right? You're able to do X, Y, and Z. You've had training in this. You've had this much experience. All of that's really important in your overall candidacy. But in the group interview, a lot of that personal stuff isn't as relevant because A, you don't really have a platform to talk about it.
Yeah.
And B, that's not what they're testing for, right? Instead, they want to see, can you work in a team?
Yeah.
And so in order to do that,
Yeah.
you really have to think carefully about how you're interacting with everyone else, right? You don't want it to be this competitive
Yes.
me versus everyone.
Right.
It's much more so me and everyone
Yeah,
else.
it's the collective, it's the we. Because also what they're looking for, let's say they're trying to build a team, right? So you're not necessarily competing for the same job. It's very possible, it is possible for multiple people to get selected to the next round or to be chosen to be part of the team or the company. So don't ever think of it as, oh, like, is it me or is it him or is it she or is it I or like who's going to get the job?
Yeah.
I have to one up them. No, absolutely not. Definitely don't try to one up people because
Yeah.
that will stand out. in the
Exactly.
hiring manager's
It doesn't
mind.
look good. So
Yeah.
one-upmanship is very common in business and no one likes it, right? The person who is one-upped feels embarrassed and insulted.
Yeah.
The people watching that person being one-upped kind of cringe, like,
Yeah.
oof.
It's like, oh, all right. Well,
And the person doing the one-upping is totally oblivious to what else is going on, right? None of that's sort of conducive to good business.
right. Or good team building.
Or good team building, right?
Yeah.
Good business is about developing cohesiveness and consensus,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? And That's the only way that you can get a group to work together, is if they're all sort of on the same page.
Yeah.
And to do that, you want a collaborative mentality. And that's what's so powerful in group interviews. If you can shift from, okay, just one of us is going to get this role, to we could all get this role, we could all get similar roles.
Yeah.
And the more that we help each other out, the better we're all going to look.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
That's really that's the mentality you want to sort of shift toward, because it's going to cause you to be much more collaborative in your interactions with people.
That's right. So what does collaborative language, collaborative communication look like? Well, it's a lot of, showing support for ideas. So saying that's a great idea. So complimenting sincerely. And when you disagree, doing that in the right way, things like, well, that's a great point, but have we considered this option? Or might we consider, this scenario? Or what about this, to try to reach a compromise, right? So even when there's contention and, conflict per se, there's always a moment where we can find compromise.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like leaning in, showing active listening with your body, and very important, eye contact.
Yeah.
Right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So eye contact is something that you want to evenly do across everyone in the room, right? Have you ever, I would always cringe back in school when we would have a presentation and the person presenting, they would come up to the front of the classroom, right? Traditional presentation style. And they would be presenting to the teacher, to the person who is evaluating them. And it's like, no. First of all, you're making the teacher very uncomfortable. With someone for that long it's uncomfortable. Secondly, you're not, what about the other, 30 people in the room? What about, them? Are you not considering what they, have to offer in terms of like active listening? And so it's very important, right, to make sure that you're spending about 2 to 3 seconds on each person, right? And not like racing about the room, right, with your eyes. But really being very deliberate about making eye contact, because when you don't do it, it's noticeable. And if you do it in the wrong way, it's noticeable, right?
Yeah, that's very important. In a group interview context, the eye contact is one of the key ways to establish a collaborative environment, right? If you're only looking at one person in the group, that person might feel like you're confronting them or calling them out, right? It can feel combative or even aggressive. And
or awkward even. Just like, even if you're like smiling at them and just locking eyes with them, it's just not the tone you want to reach.
So by sort of deliberately allocating your eye contact to different people throughout the room, you say, not only am I speaking to this person, I'm speaking to everyone. I'm speaking to you and you and you, right? I'm saying you are all part of this conversation, and I care what you think. I care that you understand what I'm saying. And this even includes situations where someone says something and you're responding to them, right? We're used to responding directly to the person to whom spoke, right? But in a group interview context, that's not really the goal here. You're not trying to convince that one person of something. You're trying to convince the whole group of something.
That's right.
Or make them aware of something. And so you want to keep that in mind. Every single person in the room is as important as the other people. And so by distributing your eye contact evenly, you establish that sense of inclusiveness.
Yeah.
Right? Which is again what we're going for here. The more inclusive you are, not only will it reflect well on you, it makes you look like a considerate and effective team player. It also gets the rest of the room, the people in the room, liking you more.
That's
right?
right.
When you make someone feel included, they're more likely to agree with what you're saying. They're more likely to accept what you're saying.
Absolutely.
And have a higher opinion of you, right? So it's sort of a massive win-win. And you contrast it, we were talking about before, with the one-upmanship, right? When you one-up someone, it turns that person against you, and it turns sort of the room against you too.
Yeah.
They start to perceive you as a bit of a jerk or an egomaniac.
A know-it-all.
A know-it-all.
Yeah, just...
And then you start to lose your ability to influence the group. And as soon as you lose that ability to influence the group, you don't look like a good team player.
That's right.
And it's not going to reflect well with the hiring manager.
Right. And the reality is that we work in teams, right? Even if you're a CEO or very high up on the ladder, corporate speaking, you're still working with teams. You're still interacting with people. So more and more, I think we're going to see, yes, I know it's very industry specific and type of company specific, but I think more and more we'll be seeing these group interviews as well. So it's not something that you should balk at in terms of, oh, I don't think I'll ever need that. It's definitely something to prep for, right? And the other thing is when you're in a group setting, to also show this inclusive, collaborative behavior, we really want to pay attention to who hasn't spoken yet, right? And if you notice somebody hasn't spoken, but they're clearly trying to, make motions to do that, but maybe they're shy or maybe they haven't had a chance to speak. Maybe there's someone who hogs the floor, whatever the case. If you notice that, then in a very nice, gentle, communicative and collaborative way, you say, Jane, do you have anything to add? Or Matt, do you want to elaborate on that?
Right. Or were you going to say something?
Yeah, because people always like that. Not, again, being careful about not singling them out, similar to the eye contact situation, but really focusing on, who has spoken the most, who has spoken the least, and try to get everyone to participate, right? Effectively, that's what we're looking for as well.
Totally. And when you do things like that, when you bring other people into the conversation, they're very grateful.
Yeah.
The hiring manager also notices that because when you think about, in a team setting, right, the best teams have the ability to sort of hear everyone's opinion, right? The team is only as strong and intelligent as the number of participants in that team.
Yeah.
And so if you have a team where only 2 or 3 people are speaking, the team is only 3 people smart, right? But if it's a team of 10 and you get everyone's opinion, you get a lot more context.
Right.
That doesn't mean you have to, and this is actually an important topic, that doesn't mean when you come to a decision, it needs to include all 10 people's opinions. Right? You don't want a Frankenstein sort of
situation.
Outcome.
Yeah.
Where it's just this, what do you call it? Pastiche of various ideas.
Patchwork,
right? Or what's the what are those called? The mosaics. You don't want a mosaic answer, right?
Right.
Where it's a bunch of different ones. What you are looking for is the best answer, and by getting more ideas in the mix, people can kick those around and come to a more informed conclusion as to what they're doing.
Right.
And so that's important in a group interview setting too. When you get to the point where, and we didn't really talk about this, but the group interviews are typically structured around some kind of prompt.
Yeah.
Right. And so with this prompt, the idea is you guys will debate it and then come to some kind of resolution about it.
Yeah.
It can be a negotiation where there's one team versus the other. Yeah. It could just be a difficult business scenario, like a company's losing money. What action should they take? Mm-hmm. Or it could be, the brand just had some bad PR. Mm-hmm. How can we remediate this?
Right.
Remedy this situation. So there's some kind of prompt, and then basically the group has to discuss it and come up with some kind of solution.
Right.
When you're doing that, again, you don't have to include everyone's suggestions in the solution, but by including everyone in terms of discussing what possible solutions there could be, when you finally come to a decision on what it is, everyone feels at least like they had their say.
Right.
And that's just a much better outcome. It looks better for the hiring manager.
That's right. So now let's talk about the hiring manager or the recruiter, the HR manager, whoever's in the room sort of like orchestrating this whole thing. What is their role in the group interview?
Yeah, I mean, basically what they're doing, generally speaking, they're not going to be in the conversation. They're sort of a fly on the wall is the objective. And they're just
circulating
watching
the room.
They may be walking around. They could just be in one spot. But the objective for them is really just to figure out how people are interacting with each other.
And looking at the dynamics.
Watching the dynamics. Yeah. And when you do something like include someone or support someone.
Brownie points.
Brownie points. You're getting checks.
That's right.
If you put someone down, if you interrupt them in an aggressive way.
Make fun of them or even sarcastically, right? There's not really a place for sarcasm in something like this.
No, you want very clean, clear, frank conversation.
Transparent communication.
Yeah, exactly. The clearer and more candid you can be, the more people are going to like you, the more they're going to understand you.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, a lot of this keeps coming back to your ability to influence the group. And you don't have to influence them in terms of sort of deciding or using your solution, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter if they use your solution or someone else's solution.
Right.
But if you can prove that you can facilitate the consensus toward any specific solution,
Right.
that shows that you're able to exert influence over a group. And that's what they're really looking for. At the end of the day, they're looking at, okay, which of these people in this group can facilitate consensus? And it can be multiple people, right? But that's what they're evaluating. They're just essentially saying, how is this person interacting in the group? Are they being polite? But more importantly, are they driving consensus? Are they moving the conversation toward a solution?
That's right. And on that topic, right, sometimes in conversation, things get you get off track, right? So you want to make sure that if you're assuming the role of a guide in this kind of scenario, which is what we recommend, that you really consider, making sure that everyone's still on track. So if you notice maybe a sidebar conversation is happening, or, the conversation is now derailing and just taking us somewhere else, which is fun in different scenarios, right? It's fun to see where conversation takes you, but not in a scenario like this where, you're under a certain time frame, you're there for very specific purpose.
Yep.
And a lot of people are involved in this process. So you want to make sure that you're not getting off track.
Yeah, that's very important. We talked about earlier, this isn't a platform for you to wax poetic about your
accomplishments,
your
recent hike to Mount Everest.
Yeah, exactly. Your recent summit of a glacier, or your ability to code in C++. Right? That's not what this is for. This is about discussing the problem, coming to a solution.
Because they know that already, right? The hiring manager, if you send them your resume, they know that. Yeah. You've probably already had a one-on-one with someone at some point.
Yes, right. They have information elsewhere. I will say there's one instance where you can talk a little bit about your experience. If you are speaking to the group and you have an opinion that you want to back up with some proof, then it's okay to say, look, I have a lot of experience, working in car manufacturing.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you is that the assembly line process should include these kinds of safety checks. Right. If you draw from it in that way, where it's just all you're doing is saying, I'm speaking
why I'm credible,
why my opinion here it has credibility.
Yes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's okay to do that.
Yeah.
But you don't want to go too much into that. The point really is to just sort of work with the group.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, that's an effective way to help drive a consensus in a collaborative way.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of, these little things that we might not think about, but are very important in what you're being, evaluated on in that type of interview, the group interview. Now let's talk about how it changes from online to offline, because online interviews are a dime a dozen, and they have been for some time now, and now we even see that more so. But what about with group interviews, right? We talk about like Zoom fatigue and, these big buzzwords that we hear floating around the internet. But with a group interview, be it Zoom, be it whatever platform you're using, you're all there, right? So how do we shift from the in real life group interview to an online group interview?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's becoming probably much more frequent.
Yes.
Right? Previously, a group interview was almost definitely in person. When I was doing my business school interviews, you literally had to fly to the location. I was in Beijing at the time, and I had to fly to Shanghai and do my group interview in Shanghai. In today's world, I think you're more likely to have them online. And so there are some important differences that you need to be aware of.
Right.
The first is, if you don't have much experience talking to teams and talking with teams and working with teams in collaborative conferencing software, that's something you definitely want to start practicing, right? Even if it's just with friends.
Yes.
Start using some of these tools, right? Most video conferencing software now has the ability to bring in 5-10 people on a free basis.
Right, exactly.
And so start using those. And some of them, the free ones might be limited to like 30 minutes or something.
But that's okay.
But get a bunch of people online and practice directing your conversation, right? One of the around the room. the virtual room, as it were.
Yeah.
One of the ways you can do that is to use people's names.
Right.
Right. It's handy. Oftentimes, you'll have people's names on the plates, and so when you talk to someone, address them with their name. Take advantage of the fact that their name's right there. You don't have to memorize it; it's right there. And say, Tom, this is something that I know you feel strongly about, but Jane, on the other hand, thought that it should be done the other way, right? So by mentioning multiple people and using their names, you start to you can effectively build that collaborative atmosphere.
Yeah, and you're building rapport with that person, and you're showing the others that you're taking care to treat everyone as a colleague.
Exactly.
Even.
Yeah, and equally, because the reason we want to do something more deliberate here is we can't use eye contact the same way, right?
Yeah.
You can't really scan the room with your eyes when you're just looking into one camera lens. And so you need to be more explicit about, singling out people and saying you or this person,
right,
to show that you're actually directing a conversation to everyone in the room, and that way you still establish that inclusiveness without having to worry about the eye contact component.
Exactly. And on the eye contact component with the camera, right, in your laptop or your computer or your external webcam or whatever, when you're looking in the camera, you're making eye contact, right? But you want to, when you're in a face-to-face communication setting, when we're making eye contact, we're also able to read their faces. We're able to look at their micro expressions. But obviously, the logistics don't work out the same way with an online setup, right? So for that, you really want to divide your time between properly allocating eye contact as well as reading their faces.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot in the face and in the nonverbals, right, that we can glean as to whether they're on, par with, on the same page as you, whether something's confusing, if they have a quizzical look, if they have a look of understanding, and being able to gauge that is very, very, very important, because that's how we use that as a springboard for what comes next.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is an advantage actually with the Zoom setup or whatever web conferencing software you're using, because you can see people's faces in a more sort of compact way.
Gallery view.
Gallery view, exactly. So really paying attention to how people are responding to what you're saying can go a long way toward determining, are they aligned with you? Are they confused, right? Are they supporting you? So that's a really good point.
Yeah. So just, being aware of, we always like to, whenever we're talking about, going in to perform somewhere, be it public speaking or an interview or a meeting, anywhere where you really need to bring your A game, you want to recon ahead of time as much as you can, as best as possible, right? And so I love the idea of having a meeting with friends. And you don't even have to tell them, look, I'm practicing for my group interview on Monday, but just, have a casual conversation, meet up, right? That's also very common these days. We love getting on those, Zoom calls and the video chat calls and all of that. So it's not going to be strange. And then really try to hone in on a few things that you want to practice yourself, be it calling someone out like kindly and bringing them into the conversation. That's what I mean by calling them out, using their name, making eye contact, practicing active listening. I mean, there's so many things that you can work on, right, to make this as successful as possible.
Yeah, any skill that you feel like you would call on to be an effective team player is a skill that's going to help you in these group interviews.
Yeah.
And so that's, the more team settings that you can find yourself in and start to deliberately address some of the skills we've discussed will go a long way.
Yeah.
We actually have a web course out on group interviews.
Yeah.
And we really encourage you to check that out. That'll be in the show notes here, because we go into what we've been discussing today in a lot more depth.
Yeah.
And by mastering those skills, not only are you going to get much better at group interviews, you're also going to be more effective on teams in general.
Yeah.
So even if you don't have a group interview coming up, the course can still be very useful. These skills really apply very broadly to any collaborative context.
Right. So if you're working on a team, this is, something that you might consider working on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll link it below.
Yeah. So we could keep talking about this, but
Yeah.
we're running up on the time limit here.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
If you're joining us live, if there's anything you want to throw in on that sidebar, feel free to do so now before we pop off. And otherwise, you can always leave a comment and we'll get to it. So this is something that, I think we can all benefit from because we all end up working on teams at some point. Even in the case where you run your own business, you have virtual assistants scattered across the world, you still have a team, be it virtual or
Oh, yeah,
not, right?
absolutely.
You're still working on a team.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things that I think everyone can benefit from.
Yeah, huge dividends. And if you do end up taking the course and there's something that's not there that you'd like to see there, let us know because
Yeah.
those are living documents as well, and we can continually update them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully this was helpful.
Yes. Thank you for being here.
And-
We appreciate you. And we'll come at you with another lesson and live stream next week. So
yeah,
stay
you can
tuned.
count on it.
That's right. Happy exploring.
Happy exploring.